Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to WIN Season 2 kickoff. We got some more people joining us here. Looks like we've got some really great members already in. I see Francis. I see Jennifer in. We got our WIN entourage also in the background here helping to make this Season 2 is going to be an amazing Season 2. I'm really excited. So for those of you who are kind of new to this whole WIN thing, we reinvigorated WIN, which really started out as kind of a networking group. We got together during, the Arcview events and mostly for breakfasts and lunches. And it really started to expand and it really became a thing that people look forward to, myself included. And so we've decided to really take a stance for women in cannabis and doubling down on this WIN program and championing the movement to bring more women as investors, women as founders, running companies, and also, really importantly, the products that we use to the forefront of this industry. And we have a very strong voice. We are thought leaders in our community, and this truly is our platform. We're also redefining the word investor, and especially for this group, it's not the just traditional sense of being an investor with your dollars, but also investing in the success of women and helping each other and being there for each other and helping to champion, other women in this space and to uplift women and those who are creating products with purpose and benefiting women of all races and creeds and so forth. And so with this group of dynamic women, we want to highlight their journeys and to share their stories so that we can help to educate other women who are coming up in the ranks and, again, to support each other. So we're actually expanding Season 2. We started out with one event a month. We're actually now going to be doing 2 events per month. They're going to be on the first and third Mondays of every month, except for this one, which we had a holiday yesterday. So I hope you all had a great holiday and ready for fall, whatever that might mean in this new COVID world. But we're going to be doing these now twice a month. So please make sure you check your WIN portal. Make sure you connect with us on Slack so you can see when these meetings are coming up and you don't want to miss one of them. Reminder that there's a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So make sure you use that for these questions that we want to show or throw at Jessica at the end of this Tales from the Top. I'm going to ask some really good ones, but I'm sure you all have some really great questions as well. And if you're a WIN member and you've already signed up, we're going to have an after party. So Jessica and I are going to roll up our sleeves and kind of let our hair down and really just get real with everybody and answer questions in a live format. So make sure you follow that to a separate link. You're going to have to log out of this particular webinar and then join us for the after party right after. So it is really my pleasure to welcome Jessica Billingsley, who is the CEO of Akerna, to join me today for Tales from the Top. So in June of 2019, Jessica became the first CEO of a cannabis ancillary company to be listed on Nasdaq. That was an incredible feat, not just for any human on this planet, but also for a woman to take the helm of this company and to be the first to list on Nasdaq. She co-founded MJ Freeway in 2010, where she served as president, and until April of 2018, and then later became the CEO of MJ Freeway as they were being acquired by MTech, which then formed Akerna. In 2015, she was named one of Fortune's most promising female entrepreneurs. In 2018, she was named one of Inc. magazine's 100 female founders. And in 2019, she was named to Entrepreneur's inaugural list of 100 most powerful women. Wow, what a resume. Prior to MJ Freeway, Jessica earned her degree in communications and computer science from the University of Georgia, and later became CEO and founder of ZoCo, which was a technology services firm with clients across the United States. She's had over 20 years of technology and systems experience in rapidly scaling businesses, and Jessica is highly regarded as an executive in both tech and cannabis. So, Jessica, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim.
So great to be here. So where are you, first of all, in the world today?
I am in our corporate offices here in Denver, Colorado, where it was in the 90s yesterday and it's snowing today. So never a dull moment.
So you went from mountain hiking to snow skiing just about in like a 24-hour period of time.
That's the goal. One time since I moved to Colorado, I headed up to the mountains to go skiing and then actually visited a pool in the afternoon here in Denver. But it was more novelty than because the snow was really any good.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, before we get into what you're doing now and Akerna and all the success you've had and like those strategies to get there and what you've done, let's hear about your story. How'd you get into cannabis to start?
From very early on, I was in the camp of, if you tell me not to do something, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. I grew up in Georgia before the launch of Girls in STEM initiatives. At 16, I received a full academic scholarship to the University of Georgia, where I received a degree in communications and computer science. I was only one of 3 women in the computer science program. I excelled academically, but my physical pursuits like rock climbing taught me that most limitations are mental. And looking at my industry choice with that insight, the path I've taken makes a lot of sense. I owned my own tech firm when I was invited to invest in one of the first licensed cannabis operators here in Colorado. I really believed in cannabis as an alternative medicine. I have a personal connection, somewhat a family member with a demyelinating illness. And cannabis has proven to be efficacious for that. And in fact, I very early in MJ Freeway's life met the patient of one of our clients who had MS, demyelinating illness is similar to MS, who had been wheelchair bound. And after 6 months of cannabis, he had run a 5K when I met this gentleman. And so I was really driven by that desire to participate in the industry very early on and to participate with my dollars. So I invested in this operation, and they asked me to choose a software to run the operation as the investor owner with a technology company. And here we are.
You're looking around going, where is that software?
I feel strongly that people wanted to know what they're getting with their cannabis products and that technology could provide the backbone to enable that tracking, compliance, and safety through a chain of custody. And that was the invention of of seed to sale tracking. If you go to seedtosale.com, it still redirects to our website and the start of our ERP platform, MJ platform.
Fantastic. Well, and that's really it, right? It's the necessity. Mother is the invention, or the beginning of necessity, or how I'm going to butcher that statement, but we all know it. But but that's the truth. And that's, I think, a lot of really, astute entrepreneurs and people who are really driven by mission, find that. They find that space where, they need that information. They want to have that validation and they want to do that. So let's talk about your journey to the Nasdaq bell ringing and Akerna, because it really did start with MJ Freeway. And so, tell us about that journey. So you decided that you needed software. What happens?
So we got our start in Denver in 2010. When we started the company, our core focus was on providing compliance and technology to the emerging, first truly regulated legal cannabis market. And as the only technology to cover the entire supply chain, we had the first mover advantage and have been the software backbone for the industry's most iconic organizations since. I like to say that the cannabis economy runs on Akerna. Our second generation product, so this is 2010. When we launched, we sold a license a day for the first 90 days. Wow. And continued to grow really rapidly with the industry in the years thereafter. Our second generation product was launched in November 2016. The MJ platform, built for cannabis, enterprise resource planning, ERP tech. I raised our Series B round of financing that was led by Roger McNamee to build this product. We developed it because our clients were growing and they needed the software that could support them along the way. They needed that level of enterprise to true mid-market tracking. We solicited months of feedback and input from real-world users and helped us build a product that had the right visibility, data and analytics, robust inventory tracking that not only the industry of today needs, but also the industry of the future as we evolve.
Were there any other competitors in? I mean, ERP, you think of, Oracle and Microsoft and SAP and all these other, big dogs. They're not in it, are they?
No, and back then they were certainly willing to have conversations with us, but they weren't even willing to integrate. I'm very proud to say that today we now have integrated MJ platform to Sage, to NetSuite, to SAP. So we're able to provide that our sweet spot, which is our IP that we have built around supply chain tracking and the data and analytics that are specific to cannabis, while still allowing those enterprise clients to have a world-class accounting and financial tax reporting system with one of those providers. It's also more cost-effective for them than if they were to try to, now that some of them, in some places, not every jurisdiction, not, for instance, NetSuite is available in Canada currently, but not in the US with our integration. They are willing to, they're willing to work with the providers, but if they had to rebuild everything we've done from scratch, that's millions and millions of dollars of custom development, custom implementation, and then you have to do it in the next market in which you're working as well. So for us, there's a real value proposition to the industry and to those companies and not having to maintain the compliance layer. So we become a channel versus a competitor, and that was possible because of the federal state conflict and the years we had to grow and being able to build this product.
Okay, so you've got almost a license a day when you're starting out. All these new markets are coming into play. So what was the decision to actually go ahead and sell or to merge in and then create Akerna? That must have been a tough one because, it's hard to kind of sometimes give up your baby, right?
So we were VC backed at that point in time. And in 2017, MTech listed as the first US listed special purpose acquisition company, or SPAC, focused on acquiring a business ancillary to the cannabis industry. And they did list on Nasdaq. We had some discussions with our board. We had been approached by MTech. We were really the only scaled technology provider. It was MTech. So I think they were hoping for a tech company, although we're certainly, I think, open and exploring all options. And within the tech realm, we had two things that were unique and made us a pursuit. We were the largest and most scaled provider at the time, with the most market share in the industry, and also we had the only platform that served the entire supply chain, and was built for ecosystem. Today, we have more than 80 integrated products. So those two things put us in a position where we could integrate other technologies and really grow. And that's what made us desirable from our board's perspective. And of course, my perspective, in doing our research, we saw going public through a SPAC as it can be an affordable way for a smaller company to go public. We also saw it as an advantage from a legal perspective, in that Nasdaq would need to actually make a decision to whether to allow us to stay listed or to delist the SPAC. So there were a couple drivers there that made it a compelling strategic decision.
Good decision overall. And because you're on a U.S.-based market, U.S. investors can buy those shares without any sort of friction, which, personally, I have Canadian company stock, and it's a little bit more challenging, getting a Canadian brokerage and those sorts of things. So, I would imagine that made a little bit more of an access to capital, especially as you're getting this growth. Did you say how many integrated products you have now?
More than 80.
Oh my God. That's a lot. To integrate one or two is a lot, in my opinion. How did you do 80? You must have a great team.
Well, we do have a great team. I take credit for assembling them and for filling my team with people that are better at each piece that they do than I could ever be. and they're really truly our greatest asset. But from a standpoint of how do you do that in an effective way, from a tech perspective, you have to make an architecture decision from day one, and that when we built MJ Platform, we were able to do that. We were able to build for the needs of the future, and we were able to build a product that didn't have to be retrofitted to allow connections. We built it fully on, this is very techy, but they're called REST APIs. We built it on an infrastructure that would allow that ecosystem, and we were able to, if you think about big companies that do this, we have a partner site on our website. You sign up, you receive our API information, you code to it, and then that becomes a funnel for us. So we have our integrated folks who then may become strategic partners where there's a deeper relationship and maybe some type of referral or revenue agreement. And then, of course, that feeds a pipeline for potential acquisition for us. And we're not reinventing the wheel. There are big tech companies who have done this successfully in the past.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that was very, very a lot of foresight for you, because a lot of tech companies, especially in cannabis, I noticed when I was making my first tech investment, I should have gone to MJ Freeway, did not have that, and they said, oh yeah, we'll get there. We'll build APIs later, and like you said, if you don't architect it right at the beginning, you have to go in and re-platform, and that just is huge disruption. And sometimes you don't succeed. I mean, companies fail because they have to do that. So kudos to you for recognizing that at the onset and building this, this platform where, you could grow and scale at such a rate. That's amazing. So what's the difference between running a public company and a private company, if you had to boil it down to just a few things?
Well, of course, your reporting and information is out there from a public perspective, although I never felt that was not out there with as tightly knit as the cannabis community is, and especially the investment community. It's interesting that you should ask that, especially through the lens of being a female CEO of a public company. A good friend of mine said to me, you can't just go to Vegas and do whatever you want anymore. And I said, do you know what it's like to be a female CEO? We don't do that anyway, ever. Right. That is never allowed. And in some ways, I think there's a standard for behavior that you're held to, and certainly some more structure to your reporting requirements and some more overhead. Otherwise, it's been business as usual from a lot of standpoints.
That's great. Well, we always hear that, being public can have a huge distraction, and you've got a lot of things with shareholders and IR issues and things like that. But, again, if you're kind of shooting that way anyway as a privately held company, there shouldn't be that much difference when you do go public. So I guess maybe if somebody's complaining about that, we need to look at how they were operating as a public or as a private company first.
Actually, can I say one more thing on that?
Yeah,
I agree. And I think that it's really a testament to the great quality of private investors that we had as a venture-backed company. Dow Capital, whom we met originally through Arcview, as you may know, Roger McNamee, just the marquee of folks that I had invest in us, and for all of them, we at least all of the leads, we were their first or one of their very first cannabis investments. And they got comfortable with us because we were ancillary, because we were technology, because we were compliance. And because of that, I had these incredible mentors and board members as a private company that I learned so much from all of my interaction and working with them. And it really helped me to be very prepared for this step in leveling up. So I would be remiss if I didn't give some credit there.
Well, and actually now that you're mentioning, kind of talking a little bit too about, and you mentioned this earlier about sort of the Vegas comment about, the differences between sort of male and female leadership, and especially in CEO and board level and things like this, and the fact that you had these great mentors. I'm going to make an assumption that a lot of them were men. hopefully not all, but at least probably the majority. I mean, how is that for you? I mean, first coming through the tech world, male dominated, then working in, cannabis, also fairly male dominated, and sliding, women used to have a lot of more senior positions, and now we're kind of losing some traction there. I mean, what would you say are some of the things that you're either skills or, tools or tricks that you've learned along the way to sort of, equalize that for you?
Oof. Well, it's tough to say whether I've equalized it. By the numbers, if you, and this is where you maybe get into some interesting territory. If you look at the valuations at which I raised versus my male peers in cannabis tech that came after, and the fact that our product suite was more developed versus even if there was no difference in the products, they raised at higher valuations than I did by the numbers. Now, is that because I was first and there was a risk factor to me being first? Or is it because I was a woman and there is an overhead there? I think it's impossible to say whether it's played a factor. Certainly in my career in technology, it's been, and this is an interesting statement too, 20 years ago, when I entered tech as one of only 3 women in my computer science program, I assumed that would continue to progress and improve. And it's an unsettling statistic to hear that 20 years later, there is a lower, 25 years later, whatever it is, there's a lower percentage of women in tech today than 20 years ago. And when we think about that, and I look a lot particularly at the fact that there's not only the initiative to get girls into STEM, which I think there are a lot of great programs focused on that today, but even once women go into a STEM field, 57% of them drop out in the first 10 years. And so I'm focused, we in fact have a corporate social responsibility campaign around this called the One Woman Challenge, in how to support, how to further that. And not because, and I want to be really clear on this, because all forms of diversity are good for business. Not because when you look at it through that lens, that all forms of diversity are good for business, by the metrics, by the numbers, by the innovation metrics, it's important to ensure that we're supporting that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, when I was at Golden Seeds, we participated in and also sort of were active in a lot of study around, the diverse boards, the diverse teams, and outperforming, sort of the gender, neutral sort of other cohorts and stuff. And it was really interesting, just, the amount of ROI that was delivered back to investors having diverse teams. And I think that, that's something we can really rely on, or at least have a data point going forward. It's putting into action, though, that is really, really sort of tough, I think, because there are all these other, not just, women don't go to Vegas per se, like you said, but, we just.
It's not that we never go, it's we don't go out the same way.
Not the same way, right? And we're not having those same kind of, cocktail conversations or over the golf course or, different things like this. And so, it's learning to, learning together how to do business differently. And then respecting sort of, those hobbies that we all have that we can then just participate in, for fun versus having those be business and pleasure at the same time, and it is tough. I mean, I had a startup in the oil business and I self-selected myself out of the CEO role because of that reason, because I just wasn't effective, as a female going down to Texas and raising money in an all male world. And, they're looking at me differently. And I didn't want that. And I wanted the company to succeed. And so I stepped out of that role. And would I do that again? I don't know, right? I'm not sure yet if we're there. But, it's something that I'm cognizant of and, have to adjust to at some level. But that's great. And I would love you to put into the chat here for everybody, those initiatives that you're working on. You had mentioned another one too, Stop the Drop, I think it is. that
Right.
you're
So
involved?
that's second when women drop out in that first 10 years, how can we help stop the drop? And the idea behind the One Woman Challenge is very simple. And our many of my male colleagues here participate as well. It's not something that only women can participate in. It's the idea that you help one woman, whether it's a mentorship, email introduction, maybe it's a coffee, but the idea that all those things seem like small little drops in the bucket, but they can become the swell of real change. And often it is the small things that create real change.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I found too, and earlier in my career, is that there just weren't a lot of women mentors. Like most of my mentors were men, and great men. I mean, they really helped me kind of keep focused, the eye on the prize and what I was really going for, and, things along those lines. But, I look back in sort of my earlier career, and I wasn't a mentor either. And, I think that's one area that women can step up to, is really helping other women and not feeling sort of either competitive or something along those lines, and just really opening that up. So I thank you for stepping into that. Also being part of WIN. I think this is somewhere that women, especially in cannabis, can go and really have that support and that network to ask questions and not feel like they're going to be judged about that question. Is it the right one? Should I know before I ask the question? No, go ahead and post it in our Slack channel, and we're pretty open-minded about most things, and we'll get back to people right away about it. You did a study on women called Beyond the Bucks. Okay. And I noticed that you quoted something, or you were part of that recent study. And you said that you found that although women routinely encounter barriers, they adapt and move forward, and leading their business and employees to substantial growth and success. And so why do you think, or what is it about women, do you think, that makes us sort of, hit these barriers and being flexible and adaptive, and then we still persevere?
That's a good one, Kim.
I had to sneak in a couple of those,
Sneaking it in. You mentioned flexible. Other words might be resilient or anti-fragile. I love Nassim Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile. I think everyone should read it. There is a difference. Brene Brown did a book, Rising Strong, similar, but I really, really love Nassim Taleb's book there about being anti-fragile. And I certainly think that in some of the barriers that we overcome in our career, it being the only woman in a computer science class, for me also, outside of work, I loved rock climbing, and that was not something in which very many women participated many years ago either. I'm pleased to say that there's a much greater number of women pursuing that sport today, but certainly not when I was doing it early in my career. And so as we think about that flexibility, I also love the peacetime, wartime leadership strategy from Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And one of those pieces is I know that I don't know everything. So I do my best to surround myself with the best, with our people, with people that are much better at everything they do than I could ever do at their individual positions. And then there's building a culture, which is like building a family, living and breathing our core values in everything we do as a company and everything I do as their leader. If I always do the right thing, show people I care, and be part of the solution, I know we'll grow together and make an impact.
That's fantastic. Well, and, that's the other thing too, is, if your staff and your team have a purpose, right, and you set that purpose, which you did years ago, right, at MJ Freeway, and just saying, this is what we are setting out to accomplish, and this is how we're going to help this industry, really represent itself to the world in a meaningful and a reliable way. right? By knowing from a seed to sale basis what that means and where they can rely on these products, that was necessary, right? And that's a great purpose that, translates to the team, and everybody can latch on and know their own purpose within that overall vision and mission. I think that's fantastic. So what kind of a style of a leader? You mentioned culture, right? So what's kind of like some things that if somebody were to ask, or I would ask someone else about you, what would they say?
Well, I think, again, back to that piece of flexibility, to resilience, and to thinking about mental grit, problem solving, determination. And maybe I shared this at actually at a Win in person talk several months ago. But and I'm going to use a rock climbing analogy here. For those who aren't familiar with rock climbing, the person who's leading the climb is said to be taking the sharp end of the rope because you can take a longer fall. You climb above your gear, you can take a longer fall. So it's primarily a mental challenge. Yes, it takes physical strength, but what great climbers really have is the mental grit to go up vertical thousands of feet with little in the way of a safety net. And as leaders, many of us are out there at the bleeding edge. What can we do to separate success from failure is that mental grit to block out the noise. And finally, just like in climbing and business, you don't do it alone. Somebody is belaying you up. And when you reach the top, you secure the anchor and you bring up your seconds and your thirds and the others behind you with less risk. They have a rope above them to climb. And so the challenge, I think, for all of us as leaders is how do we reach down and always be giving a hand up to the next?
So I'm going to ask you another one that's not scripted, nor did we talk about it. What is your biggest failure?
I've answered this a couple different ways over the years. And early on, I would have said that my biggest failure was not understanding that as an ancillary business, we would still be subjected to much of the same stigma as other businesses in cannabis. And I think that today I would answer that much the same way. That has grown and changed over the years, but it's never gone away. That stigma of being cannabis. And coming from a technology background as a company focused on compliance and providing a tech background, we thought that we would be able to raise equity capital very easily. For instance, in our early years, we went from, we did 800% gain in our second year over our first year of being in business. Just incredible numbers and we were not able to get equity financing at that time due to the fear and the stigma of cannabis, and took out personal loans. Those luckily turned out. So what happened is that we ran the business for 4 years self-funded with these loans, paid off the loans before the world was ready to invest in a cannabis-related business. And today, we still encounter some of those pieces. And I think for cannabis right now, there's also a bit of a PR challenge, but from the public markets depreciation that has occurred over the past year for many cannabis businesses and the capital squeeze. Now, my failure, though, if we're going to relate it back, is just that initial not at every step along the way, I have to remind myself, it's going to be harder for us. It took us 6 months in legal with Nasdaq. That everything is harder, it takes longer, it costs more money. Yeah. But failures are things you learn from. If you look at the actual root of the word, it just means something that you learn from and you overcome.
Yeah. Well, I like Richard Branson's approach to failure. It's like all of my failures created all my successes. And, I think that's really an astute observation. And we're not there yet, like you said. I mean, we still have, we had how many years? 40 years of just say no, 50, 60 years of the war on drugs. I mean, this is not something we're going to change overnight. And it's deeply ingrained, and people were, incarcerated for it, and people were, reprimanded and scolded, and children were punished for it, and, all of these things. And it's really hard to change that mindset, even with all of the wonderful things cannabis can do. And even helping a cannabis company as an ancillary business, you're in that big fish net, right? And so I think that's a very good observation, and probably a great lesson for people who are looking to start part of our WIN network, right? People who are looking to start or further, their cannabis company, or even in their investment side. I mean, I've had, stories of friends of mine who, invested in cannabis businesses, and they froze their accounts or kicked them out, because they made an investment in a company like that. And so, we're not there yet, but I think that we're getting there. Don't you think? Don't you think it's getting better?
We have made such strides. And that's why I started answering it and said, well, it's just a different level, and it's a different level, and it's a different level. But that means we've been succeeding too. Mm-hmm. So if you look back at that failure, yes, I failed, and it took a risk that many would advise one not to take, but it did lead to a success.
Yeah.
And how can we continue that?
So we have this question on here that people always ask is like, what's your most valuable life lesson? I'd like to go back, and I would say, hey, if you had to kind of talk to your 10-year-old or 12-year-old, pick a number, maybe before 20, self, right? And you said to yourself, okay, self, here's some advice that I would give you. What would that be to that 10-year-old or 12-year-old Jessica?
This is good, because I have a 13-year-old daughter that I talk to about some of these things. So I'm going to share two things.
Yeah.
One, that it took me some time to learn in my career, and that for me, I think everyone has to learn what is the right ratio for themselves. For me, the right ratio is 2/3 challenge, 2/3 forging new territory, and 1/3 just laying brick. And what I've been talking to her about is, you need to work on laying brick. You are at an age where you have to learn the fundamentals so that you have something to build upon. And certainly for myself, I was much more impulsive than she is. She's much more mature than I was at her age. I would rush right into things. Mm-hmm. I saw a little bit the if I just get here mindset. If I just get here, then I have reached X achievement or X success. And that's such a fallacy, because you never get there. Listing on Nasdaq wasn't getting there. It was the start of a new chapter. And there's so much more exciting work to do. And if you can shift your mindset to, I'm excited to reach this milestone, and let's take the time to celebrate and appreciate the milestone, but to understand that you're never done. You never just coast in life. What's next? And I think maybe in this time of COVID, it's starting to wear on everyone. It's not a crisis. So many people come together and respond well and really soldier through a crisis. But when it becomes daily grind, that's harder. And I bike raced in college, and the mantra was, you don't win races by only riding on days you feel like riding. You got to ride on all the other days too. And I don't know, I feel like maybe that's a life lesson that I would want to share with 12-year-old me. 12-year-old me only wanted to do things when she wanted to.
And more and more and more. And yeah, no, but you're absolutely right. And there is that good balance. And always people say it's the work-life balance, but I just say it's the work and the life balance, because, work is your life and your life is work. And for most of us, we can't just kind of separate those, distinctly between them, but you have to enjoy every day of what you're doing and really get fulfillment, but also take those moments out and, pat yourself on the back and say, wow, did a great thing today, or, just even a small bit of progress. Let's talk about COVID for a second, because we haven't really mentioned it and everything, and sort of what we call this new normal. I mean, cannabis now deemed essential in many markets. I mean, I'm sure that's really kind of, given some tailwind to what you guys are doing. Is that right? Or are you seeing more challenge with COVID than benefit?
I think it's a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
And this is important. We are seeing overall consumption increase, which you would expect, truly. So the great news, and you can make a parallel, we published this in our mid-year report that I'm sure will pop here in the chat in just a minute. We talked about, and we guest featured one of our investors from Entourage Effect Capital. We talked about the parallel between the internet boom and today. So when you look at what happened when the internet crash occurred, internet consumption rose dramatically, and we're seeing a similar thing in cannabis, where there has been a devaluation over the past year, while consumption has increased and continues to increase through this time of COVID. And as we look at that juxtaposition, that time is where some of the greatest companies and biggest winners emerged in internet, and we will see the same here in cannabis. And as we look at the state of the market, the industry, the big story, you see what we foresaw when we built our enterprise product, started building that back in 2016. We saw that the industry would be moving toward more of an enterprise structure, more mid-market, volume, boutiques, specialty brands, and that there would be less room for the small business and mom and pop. And right now in COVID, when we look, we are very fortunately continuing to grow and grow nicely because we made a decision to serve that enterprise tier, that enterprise suite of businesses. We are definitely seeing impact in the SMB realm. We are seeing financial impact, capital impact. We are seeing a rapid acceleration of consolidation. And for competitive tech companies who may serve a more down market portion of the market, many are having greater challenges there. We know from some of our partners as well, they're seeing greater impact. They've had to do really extensive layoffs. So I think it's important I'm so pleased that cannabis was deemed essential. It's such great news for all of us to see the consumption trends. And we need to acknowledge that this is a acceleration of the evolution of the industry in a rapid acceleration of consolidation that might have taken place more slowly over a couple of years. Yeah.
No, I agree. I think a lot of things sort of got accelerated. One last question, then I think Laura's going to pop on here because we've got a bunch from the audience. But federal legalization. So let's just take out our, crystal ball, magic wand, whatever it might be, and just say, okay, so federally legal 2021, it hits. What happens with Akerna? Is this a positive for you? Is this something you're going to have to kind of retool what you're doing? Or, how do you feel about that?
It is a massive inflection point for us, and one that we have been preparing for many years. In forging these partnerships and strategic relationships with large traditional ERP companies, with our integrations. The former CIO of Oracle, Mark Iwanowski, serves on our board. My chief commercial officer, Nina Samasko, is a former SAP executive. We have been preparing for legalization for a long time. And because for years, the federal state conflict has allowed us to grow, to develop IP, to widen our moat, to execute on our strategy of being the only scaled tech provider. When legalization passes, it is a massive total addressable market expansion. We recently announced in a press release our partnership with Priority Payments for CBD companies. Of course, we are very interested in deepening that partnership with cannabis companies when allowed. That may, of course, be possible through the SAFE Act. or it may have to wait for a further initiative. For us, it's massive market expansion immediately and deepening of our strategic partnerships, because they'll all be looking at how do we participate more in the industry.
Absolutely. Well, and it will certainly be a massive shift for a lot of us, but also, I believe, too, huge opportunities, because a lot of the players now that will come in are going to want to buy versus build and gain that market share right away. Well, I see Laura coming on. That means we probably are at our Q&A time in the program. So, okay. Hi, Laura.
Hi. Thanks so much, Jessica, for joining us today. So we have time for just a couple questions. And the first is from Jean Savell. Jean said, being from Georgia, what do you see as the future in our state? Will you be able to come home and promote the industry here someday?
I am so delighted to share that we do have some current clients in Georgia, and we have been having lots of discussions with the different regulatory bodies there. And certainly I have a very vested interest in my home state, and will take any excuse to go home and visit family and squeeze my niece and nephews.
Thanks so much. Frances Prisoner would like to know, she has a fun question for you. Which magazine cover will you be on in 2022, and what will be the headline?
Okay, well, I know I want it to be Wired. So let's share that. That's been a dream since college, and computer science nerd declaration here. Wired, and the headline should be the cannabis economy runs on Akerna.
I like it.
You heard it here first, folks. Hopefully somebody from Wired is listening. We'll make sure they get that nugget.
Let's get some context into the WIN Slack channel.
My PR team may disagree, but that would be my personal wish.
What about this question? How has being a woman been advantageous in business?
So I love this, because we do talk about sometimes the barriers to surmount, and I have often looked back and said, I think it's a net even, because yes, some things are more challenging. On the flip side, every single person remembers you if you are the only woman in the room.
That's fantastic. What does an average day look like for you?
Oh, good. Okay. I wake up early, not because I am a morning person, but because I have trained my body into submission. I usually work out, do some type of exercise. I do a cold shower every single morning. So that freezing cold shower or cold dunk. And then it's coffee and my calls and my day start. And I'm generally through the greater part of an extended hours workday spanning time zones, juggling time between ensuring that I have some D&D time, some do not disturb time to focus on work that I know I need to complete, as well as other variety of leadership tasks, much of which is personal connection. I, in the past, traveled extensively, so you could count on at least 2 to 3 weeks out of the month, some of those days being similar routine, but in person and on the road. Today, I get to go home to my family every night from our offices here. We have dinner and play with the dog, and generally my daughter and I try to find some activity. She's 13, so she's not as interested in me reading to her anymore. We try to find some activity before bed.
And last question is from one of our men in the group, Sean Spicer. He wants to know, do you have a compliance tracking software? In particular, he's interested in tracking serial numbers and batch numbers of consumer products. And he's interested in that technology.
That sounds like our table stakes core suite of products. Please follow up, and we would be delighted to get you a demo of our software.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. That wraps up our audience Q&A for now. And we'll see some of you over at the member after party.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure,
Thanks, Jessica.
Kim.
I'll see you in a few minutes over at the party. I'll be the one at the bar drinking. But as we wrap this up, so I just want to, first of all, if you guys are interested in becoming an Arcview member, I know some of you are, kind of listening in and getting a feel for what WIN is all about and what Arcview is all about. We would love to have you, and we have a lot of different ways in which you can kind of get involved with Arcview. WIN is my favorite, the Women's Investor Network, and so please reach out to any one of us, but if you wanted to send a note specifically to Laura, she can really kind of spearhead that, and her email is lauratoomey@arcviewgroup.com. And we have a poll up here, and this will help us really kind of look at the programming that we have for season 2, which, by the way, is looking pretty awesome. But love to also ask your questions about who you are and kind of what you're interested in. So please take a few minutes, complete this poll for us so that we can, create these great programs and deliver to you exactly what you're looking for. The other thing is the after party. So as I mentioned, you're going to have to log out of this one when you're done with your poll, and I'm done talking, which will be very soon, I promise, and go over to the after party, and we'll pick it up there and continue to ask and answer some great, intriguing questions for everyone. Our next WIN meeting is going to be in 2 weeks. It's a technology panel, and it's on September 21st, and we have Sava, Trim, and Headset joining us, and it's going to be moderated by our very own Jean Sullivan. And so don't miss that program, and I will see you there, and I will see you over at the party. Take care.